I am Alen Stellian, the Midlife Empowerment Coach, and today I am thrilled to introduce Regina Martinelli. Regina is a certified master NLP transformational coach. Let me put the view on gallery. And she has a master's degree in change management and organizational development and specializes in women's limiting beliefs about money. Her model of coaching is rooted in transformative learning and neuroscience that allows access to the subconscious patterns that keep us stuck, especially around money. Regina has been designing and leading seminars for impactful and lasting breakthroughs for her clients in their businesses, personal relationships, and communities. She is astute at helping her clients uncover their unconscious blocks that prevent them from having the experience of money and life that they desire. So, Regina, welcome. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Me too. Thank you.
Yeah. So we hear a lot about limiting beliefs. And, just to get everybody on the same page to start with, what are we talking about when we talk about limiting beliefs?
Great question. It's really negative thoughts that we hold as truth. So they limit our self-expression, our agency in life, and really our ability to create what we want. Beliefs can be things like you have to work hard for money. You have to put time and sacrifice to have what you want. You deserve it because you worked hard. Or if you want money, you're greedy, you're selfish. Another popular one is with more money, I have more freedom. These are all assumed to be true. And because of that, we don't even notice them as beliefs. They're just the water that we swim in. But limiting beliefs, we all have them. And we all experience the effects of them, which is dread, procrastination, fear, stress, guilt, sometimes shame, exhaustion. They really wear us out.
They do. And where do they come from, these limiting beliefs?
Well, they were probably laid down when we were really, really young as a way to process things that were happening to us before we could actually understand what was happening. Like when we were tiny little babies, under 6 years of age for sure. And many times they're triggered by traumatic events. And the beliefs, they really get locked into place for us to make sense of the world, yet we end up dealing with their effects for decades until we realize, oh my gosh, this isn't working anymore. There's something here that's got to change.
Gotcha. Now I think you recognize, I certainly do that. Those limiting beliefs having been there for so long, and I'm assuming in some ways serving us, right?
Oh yeah.
They've got to be hard to change. You've got this belief, it's been laid down for so long, it served you for whatever, to protect you, or it had a purpose for you. How do we change those that are, so entrenched?
So great. So Ellen, one of the things I love that you said is they did serve us at a time. So when we laid them down when we were younger, they were kind of as a protection mechanism, defense, or strategy. Not that we're at that place deciding our strategy, they just got put in for that to help us, to protect us. And you're right, they've been encased and encapsulated in our brains for decades by the time it's time to shift, which makes them a little tougher. They're hard to shift for a couple of reasons. One is most transformational work deals with the conscious brain, that your cerebral cortex, your executive functioning up here, when the limiting belief is actually encased back here in what's called the base of your skull, behind all this curly hair.
Yeah.
Your reptilian brain or your critter brain is the more subconscious. Because if it was conscious what we want, then we'd already have it. It's kind of like when you get too warm and you take off your jacket, you can just do it. But with the subconscious brain, it doesn't work that way. It's in a different section of your brain, and those two areas don't really talk to each other. They're actually separate compartments. So when you go to change a limiting belief or like a scarcity money mindset, you can't reach that encapsulated limited belief because most likely there's no or very little neuro pathway connections with information to get there.
So are most of us trying to talk ourselves out of them, like using the prefrontal cortex and like arguing with ourselves, like, no, I know this is not the right thing to believe. I know this is not true anymore for me or for my life, but, and that's not going to work. It sounds like, if we're just arguing with ourselves and it's really deeply seated in there.
Correct. You're actually fighting how the brain naturally works, or at least the part of the brain that's holding that belief, right? So things like modalities that are wonderful, like meditation, journaling, and affirmations are all great, but they start with this conscious brain. And It's just a much longer route when you go through the conscious brain, and it can take for a very, very long time because you may be doing those, chatting to yourself, trying to stop yourself, or meditating for an hour a day, but this belief is running 24/7. So you're only impacting it for a short period of time, and you're not getting to its root. The other thing is a lot of time modalities want to have you catch yourself in a limiting belief, like, oh, here I am arguing, I should buy this, I don't want to buy that, or how I feel. That's all great, and it can work for sure. But when we have to catch ourselves in a limiting belief, when we're already overworked, overstressed, overwhelmed, it's just, we find it easier just to push through and keep going. And it doesn't always stick, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So I want to get into the specificity around money, because that's really your sweet spot. But before we do that, I'm just curious about, okay, so you've told us all the ways we can't shift limiting beliefs. What would you advise people to do when they do want to shift their limiting beliefs?
Right. So you have to give your brain another option, because it'll always choose the best possible option. And you have to put it in the section of your brain where the belief is rooted, in using the language of that brain. For example, our critter brain, the reptilian brain, is really focused on survival. So you need to put in pictures, sounds, and sensations that allow that critter brain to know this option is survivable, and this new chosen belief that you're putting in. And there's several modalities you can do. As I said, there's a lot of benefit to meditation, journaling, and affirmation, and all of that. It's definitely a route. It's just not the quickest route. The one that I love and am most familiar with is transformational NLP, which is neuro-linguistics programming, the language of the brain. It's really excellent at this because it uses your neurology to create new pathways from your conscious brain to your unconscious brain to give it more options. It actually gets them talking to each other, and it gets into those encapsulated beliefs to help shift them. And it's more immediate and more permanent than some of those longer routes that we see more commonly.
That sounds like a mouthful, neuro-linguistic programming. I've heard of it. Not sure I fully, like, is this a talk therapy kind of thing, or like a, like hypnosis? What are we doing here?
You just dance around and, shake.
Right. Okay. We're waving something around. I don't know.
That's great. It's a lot of different things. We do things like anchoring, which can be sensational, where you squeeze an arm or a wrist to anchor in a new belief once you find where the root is. So use the language of the brain. There's a lot of different NLP out there in the world. I studied at NLP Marin, which is fantastic, but they follow where your brain is storing the information. So where your eyes look, what your face features are doing, because sometimes we'll be hearing a voice from the past, we'll be feeling something, or we'll be remembering a picture. And then you start to ask questions about where that brain has located that picture, that sound, or that sensation. And you start to uncover these traumatic events that happened when they were younger that got encased. And you start to pick it out. A lot of times we made up beliefs at that time, like I'm too much, I'm not enough, or I don't deserve this, or my parents are fighting, so it must be me because I'm here. And again, these can happen in utero and definitely under 6 years of age. So, and then once you find that limiting belief, there's anchoring and simple exercises that we do to kind of re-imprint it to provide a second experience. Because you can't ever get rid of that experience, nor do you want to, but you can add something that neutralizes it and then gives you a more positive feeling for your brain to choose from.
Wow, that sounds really interesting and really powerful. I'm going to have to look into that. I just think that's a novel way of approaching it, rather than sort of the, talk yourself out of it kind of thing, which I could see would be a very temporary solution to a long-term, issue potentially. So yeah, that's very interesting.
I'll add in real quick. Some of our exercises, we walk on the floor and we anchor different spots for different sensations and pull it back into the place that it needs to go. So it's much more simple than people realize.
Yeah.
Very powerful. And you don't have to remember to be different or to act different. It just kind of integrates and takes over.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool. So I want to talk some more now about, the topic of the day, which is I think why a lot of people are going to be interested in this, and that really has to do with money and the money blocks. So how do you connect? You've got these limiting beliefs. I'm assuming people have a lot of them around money.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I love working with money because it's not just about money, because money is really the gateway into how we engage with the world and how we see ourselves. So when you start uncovering people's limiting beliefs around money, you start to see how much they feel they deserve or what they feel their worth or their validity is. Because our culture, not just in the United States, but in the world, we really measure people on how much you make, how much you don't make. We put a lot of shame and guilt around how much money you do or don't have. And then that ends up, we take that personally, and it motivates us out in the world or demotivates us out in the world. So when we step into the limiting beliefs around money, we can really see how people feel about themselves. And if we can shift those, you actually have a better experience of yourself, money, and your life. That's why I love it, because it actually is deeper than just money.
Yeah. And now you talk about, people having some real blocks around money. What are the biggest blocks that you have seen in working with people in your practice?
Sure. So when we've talked about limiting beliefs, like you have to work hard for money, or I'm spiritual, so I don't need money. If I had more money, to have more freedom. None of those are true. Money is not the source of your freedom. We all know people with lots of money who aren't free.
Mm,
People who don't have much money who actually live a real free life. So money in itself is not your freedom. You are, but money is a means to certain ends. But we hold it.
interesting.
Yeah. Number two, safety patterning. Now, this is how our brain ensures we repeat patterns, even if they're awful, unwanted, or upsetting. They repeat them. Our brain repeats them because we've survived them, and the patterns are viewed as survivable by the critter brain, who's always in fight, flight, or freeze mode, and it keeps repeating them because it knows it's proving that we're still alive. And these can be patterns of struggle, stress, again, shame, guilt, procrastination. And they're based in beliefs like I'm not enough, I'm too much, I don't deserve more. A great example of this is if a kid is raised in a household where he's hit on the head by a hammer every day. That could be figuratively or actually, right?
Right.
Hit on the head every day. There's panic, there's upset, there's all these things. And then the critter brain goes, oh, wait, we can survive this. Oh, we're not dead. Nope, we can survive this. We're alive. We're alive. Are we alive? Are we dead? That's all it asks. Then that kid grows up to be 18, cannot wait to get out of this household and not be hit on the head by a hammer, and goes out into the world, and the critter brain goes, whoa, I don't know if we're still alive. When the conscious brain is saying, thank God I'm out of that and I feel this quality of life is better, the critter brain goes, I need to be hit on the head by a hammer to make sure we're still alive. So in that case, that person will go out and find a boss, a relationship, a friendship, a situation where they feel the same effects as the hammer being hit on their head. Again, either figuratively or literally, to tell the critter brain that, oh, I'm still alive. And they'll have a sense of relief, and they'll still also have that sense of pain, which is unfortunate. But those safety patternings are similar to limited beliefs because they keep happening again and again until we shift them. Because it's what we've survived then becomes what we need to survive. Again, not consciously.
So what's an example of that pattern with respect to money, for instance?
Great. If you grew up in a household where there was a lot of lack, or someone had fortune and lost fortune, that kind of level of stress, you could go out and have a great job and lose it. You could go out, have some money, lose it. Things like that. You constantly do this. Or you have a parent who does that, and that kind of stress you start to repeat.
Well, it's interesting because that makes a lot of sense to me, especially I feel like we're always attracted to the familiar, even if the familiar is, unhealthy or doesn't serve us anymore. There's a certain, pleasure is too strong, just a certain contentment or weird sense of safety in something that's familiar, even if it's destructive or unhealthy for us.
Yes, exactly. That's also, I'll describe it in my terms, which is like the critter brain feels relief that the hammer came down one more time.
Yeah.
And even though you're in this horrible situation, it's familiar and you're like, oh, I know how to get out of this. I know how to survive this.
Right.
But consciously, we want a different quality of life. So we're frustrated by it, there's all this stuff that goes on, but there's still a sense of relief. So you can have conflicting opposite beliefs about money, about all sorts of things. So yeah, safety patterning is one of the top three blocks. The third one, family inherited loyalties. This is how we limit our abilities or hold our success hostage in an effort to show love or obligation to our families, both consciously and unconsciously. For example,
wow, yeah, tell us more about that. I'm gonna need an example for sure.
Yeah, it can be handed down from generations without even realizing it. Again, it can be so unconscious, which is like, who am I to have it better than my family? We've always worked hard for our money. I can't all of a sudden have it be easy, or I can't have it easier than my ancestors when they've struggled for generations, died in war, or were killed or treated unfairly in some way. There are things that we actually start to feel guilty about on a certain level because we've inherited their pain. And we do it because we're trying to show how much we love, appreciate, and belong to that family. But there are so many better ways to show our love and appreciation to our ancestors and our family than limiting our success or carrying their struggles into our own life, because it just reproduces those struggles. And I doubt that's what your ancestors would really want for you. But it is something that we take on, that pain, especially if you've had like a great grandparent who had a fortune and lost a fortune. That caused ripple effects in your family. And there may be a grandchild that's born that will have never met that great grandfather, but will feel the effects of it, take it on, and then repeat those same patterns.
That's so interesting. I just read a book on intergenerational trauma, which I'm fascinated by. And it sounds a lot like what you're talking about. Just, unbeknownst to us, we carry the weight of past generations of trauma, or in this case, maybe limiting beliefs or other, things that are holding us back. And was just kind of an aha for me that I had never thought about, like, wait, isn't it just my experience since I was born? I mean, even stuff in utero, it's just very interesting.
It is. And a lot of this work of family inherited loyalties is based on Bert Hellinger's work. He's passed on now, but he's amazing. And he talks about there's a family system, kind of the family soul. If anyone in the system has gotten ousted, sent off to prison, did something that no one talks about, or killed and then no one speaks about it, then, or died in war, there's entanglements that happen. And if it's never spoken about, the future generations who don't even know this person existed will start to repeat those patterns, to show it, to bring it back to the surface, to include it in the family soul. And so you could be having patterns in your life that are from somebody from 3, 4, 5 generations above you.
Wow. Yeah. I want to take a moment to thank Wendy, Kim, and Madeline for being with us live today. Let us know if you've got any questions or comments. We've got a comment from Wendy. She said she got past her, she said she got past mine. I think she's talking about the third block. And she says this is an observation, but she had an event where she actually spent 33 cents on a bag of radishes when she was a struggling single parent, which was a breakthrough that allowed her to start her self-care. She was doing something healthy for herself. And sometimes you need something to kind of like get you out of your normative state or your normal way of behaving, and start to take care of yourself and see beyond the baggage that you may have inherited from your childhood or from beyond.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Wendy, for sharing that. 2 things I want to say, because a lot of this stuff that we inherit, it's not your fault. We feel a lot of guilt and shame around money, again, because we see it as a reflection of our self-worth or our validity, and it is not. And what was I going to say about that? Yes. And so it's not your fault that you have these patterns, but they're very shiftable. And it's so great, Wendy, that you spent money on yourself with those radishes to say, I'm anchoring this for myself. When it gets better for each one of us, then it can get better for all of us. Because the more of us that has a better experience in life, then we are more evidence to the rest of the world that things can be better. So it's so great that you did that for yourself, and please continue to do it.
And we start the healing process that can only help, our children or family or relatives or in future generations, by kind of stopping some of these unhealthy patterns with money, and other blocks that are limiting ourselves. And as it so happens, maybe may limit future offspring or generations.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the motivations for me. Not only did I had so much stress and different things in my life that just weren't working, but then when I had my son, I just knew I had to continue this work to make sure I didn't pass it on to him. He's going to have his own struggles, his own limiting beliefs.
Right.
Part of the deal coming onto this planet into this bodysuit, and that's okay. It's about part of our growth, but there are ways to deal with it and to not pass on one's
Yeah.
yours or one's. You can stop some with you and let him have his own.
At least, work on what some of them, and just try and mitigate the pattern moving forward. Wendy's talking about how she learned to be frugal, probably because my grandparents and parents lived through the Great Depression, and my mother was ill my whole life, so a lot of medical bills. So those are longstanding patterns and experiences, and things that the lessons or the messages you got from your parents and their experiences, even just outspoken messages or observing them, right?
Yeah, and you are in such a community of belief about it. You don't even see it as it's one of the many options, right? It's just one belief because everyone around you experiences it the same way. I come from a farming family, and we've always worked hard. You had to work hard to have your money. I was tying vines at the age of 6. So whenever I would get a little surplus of money, if I hadn't worked hard for it, my system would have it disappear. Like my car would break down, I'd need new tires, and it would be out the door. I couldn't hold on to it unless I had worked hard, because my limiting belief was, you didn't work hard, you don't deserve it. And I realized that's not at all how I want to live, because there's so much more life and vitality and joy I want to have, not, be at the end of the day trying to refresh, relax, and rejuvenate myself.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that work has to be hard. I mean, I think there's something around, I'd like my work to feel challenging, not to be just a walk in the park, because I like to be challenged and I like to learn and grow. But hard work, that's a different way of thinking about work. I mean, it makes you feel, like you said, I mean, if something comes easily to you, or you get something out of luck or whatever, or because you laid seeds a while back and then it's all coming back, I would think it would be very difficult then to find joy in those moments when the planets align and something good happens in your life, if you haven't toiled for it and struggled for it.
Yeah, and you look at that's so great. You've got people also who take like a week vacation after months of hard work. They need 2 or 3 days to decompress. They have a couple of days of fun, and then they're starting to amp up again before they go back to work.
Yeah.
You really only had 2 or 3 days of relaxation, right, out of a week. And it's something that we carry forward, but it also becomes like a badge of honor. Oh, I worked so hard. I strived. I got there. Like, to be proud of that. There's nothing wrong with being proud of the work that you do, but to your point, you don't need that extra layer of noise and struggle when it can be challenging. It can have difficult points and things you need to sort out, but it doesn't have to have that amped up stress, overwhelm. Because for some people, they just check out with fear, they check out with procrastination, they start to dread things, and it can cripple us and exhaust us.
So Nancy's always also joined us. Hey, Nancy. She says, my husband and I have super different conversations about money, but we can't get out of a right-wrong conversation. Do you see that a lot of black and white thinking around money for people?
I do. And again, it's usually based in their beliefs and their experience. And when you assume there's a right answer or right decision, then you're assuming there's presupposing there's a wrong decision, which then limits your ability to really explore and have kind of that playfulness about life, right? It's because you're always worried about making the wrong decision, so you may not make any decision, right, or what the effects of that would be. And we start judging ourselves, and it keeps limiting us down and down and down. How do you feel about it? What, for the values that you want, what makes you feel good, what decision? There's a lot of different techniques to check those out. But yeah, right and wrong. I always ask, this decision that you're going to make, if it goes the way you want it to go, what will having that do for you? And maybe you'll be like, oh, I'll feel this. And what will having that do for you? And what will having that do for you? So that last answer is probably where you're trying to get to. And is this, how do you make the decisions from there? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it's, Nancy's giving us a little bit more of a background. She says, in my mind, he fritters away money with 15 umbrellas and 20 flashlights. So that's I could see that would annoy me. I could see that, Nancy. I could see that annoying me if, yeah, I like to pare things down. So a lot of the same, buying the same thing. And I wonder what's behind that. That's interesting.
Well, I mean, I'm just gonna say this because I haven't met the person, but I haven't met him, but it sounds like a scarcity mindset. When you start hoarding, you don't believe that there'll be more coming. So you have to stockpile it all right now. And that makes it hard to spend money. It makes it hard to enjoy right now because you're so trying to, you're so afraid that it's going to be gone tomorrow versus actually really trusting it's going to be here tomorrow and allowing to be in present time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good insight. Very interesting. So she then says, in his mind, he doesn't like that I insist on private school and long investing. So that's interesting because like we're talking about a lot of little expenses versus, some big chunks of money that in her mind are much more justified, for my children, investing our money long term or whatever. And then, he's like hoarding the umbrellas and the flashlights.
And I would ask him, like, what good thing comes to somebody who hoards flashlights and umbrellas? Like, what's the experience he gets when he knows he's got 50 umbrellas and 30 flashlights? And then what he thinks is going to happen if she spends money on private school? Like, what is the fear on that side? So what's the calm that those hoarding creates, and what's the fear that her spending creates for him? And you'll start to hear where some of those limiting beliefs are potentially, and also things that he values, which aren't right or wrong. It's just what he personally values, which is lovely.
Yeah, very interesting. So when you're working with money blocks with your clients, what are you, what are you trying to unpack the block and then taking action? Are you doing you're using NLP to address it? Like how do you work around money blocks?
Yeah, I ask questions like, what are you experiencing around money right now that you don't want to experience, or what would you like to be experiencing? So we get real clear on what they want, what the current situation is through conversation. And I start watching where their brain is storing this information, because that's actually such a tell about where that limiting belief is placed, where that picture, that sound, or that feeling is that started it. And then we unpack that. And then we do some change patterns, is what I call them, where you anchor new beliefs and things they want to bring in. If it's a safety patterning, we bring in safety. We do other things that makes that younger you feel safe from what you experienced versus who you are now, because you survived. And resources that would be much more useful. I worked with a client who used to dread looking at her credit card statement every month, and she had to kind of sort out what she charged and let her partner know. And he was fine with whatever she spent, but she dreaded it. And so we had a couple of sessions, and then she came back to me and she said, it's so funny. I went and did my credit card statement. It took me 10 minutes. It usually takes me like 4 hours, because she procrastinates, she dreads be around it. And it can be that simple of a shift that you don't even notice. And you go, oh, wow, I just got 3 hours and 50 minutes back.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Very powerful. And thanks for sharing your thoughts today. I just thought there's just a lot here, and really, really interesting perspective. And I don't know, it just made me think a lot. So thank you for sharing your vast knowledge on the subject, and some real critical ways for us to kind of reframe things around money for ourselves.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you for having me. It's been a joy chatting with you. I love talking about money and our approach to it.
And if you enjoy these videos, please watch for more coming weekly. Until then, be well and stay safe, everybody. Bye.